Thanks so much. How's everyone doing? Real quick, let's give it up for Ben and Ari, by the way. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the invites. Super happy to be here. Anyone go to 11 last night? Space? Were we all sober here? Just making sure. So I know how these Miami events go. But before diving in, I haven't gotten a chance to talk to a lot of you here. Just want to get kind of a pulse check on the room. How many of you just run your own business full-time, no job? Raise your hand. How many of you have a sales team under you? Who here is running ads for yourselves? Okay, a lot of ads people. Cool. Awesome. Well, if you guys are interested in building a company that generates $1 million a month, that's what this whole talk is going to be about. Did that earlier this year. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. Basically, the process of taking something from zero, scaling ad spend all the way up to as high as $14K a day. So real quick background on myself. My name's Damon. I'm currently the CMO for a company called Springs Rejuvenation. Prior to that, I was the co-founder and CMO at a company called Offer Launch, which is actually what this is about. Also wrote copy for a couple names in the online business space, Cole Gordon, Jeff Seckinger, a few other of those. And also, I want to just preface here, I'm not a guru. I don't sell marketing, coaching, or anything like that. There's not going to be like a pitch for a $10,000 coaching program at the end of this. I'm not very popular. I don't have a bunch of Instagram followers, anything like that. And the reason why I bring this up is because, I think for me as a fractional CMO, I am pretty deep in the weeds just running marketing teams on a daily basis. So, spend a lot of money on ads. So I think I don't have a good pulse on what's working right now. So first, why do you guys think scaling companies is difficult? What issues have all of you had? Lead quality? Funding? Anything else? Marketing? Okay, makes sense. So what was it? Operational drag. All super important here. All things we'll be talking about. So in this presentation, I just want to break down the various stages because I think that every single stage as you're scaling from $0 to $1 million a month, it kind of requires you to step into a new persona, to develop new skills, to honestly change just who you are entirely. So I'm going to walk through each of these and explain, what we did well, what we learned in hindsight, some of the mistakes we made, some of the common mistakes I see other people making, just so that we can lay the whole thing out so that you can do this for yourself. So first and foremost, if we're looking at your first $100,000 month, if we're just looking at the mechanics behind it, anyone here running a company at that kind of run rate, $1 million a year approximately? Cool. So I've built, inside my old company, Offer Launch, we actually had a portfolio. So I've actually built $5 million companies this year alone. So, and also several that didn't make that. And this would be my kind of general recommendation for how to go about doing it. So if we're going to launch, I always like to launch ad spend at $1,000 a day. Now, granted, obviously that's not in everyone's budget, but if possible, circling back to, I forget who said it, funding, I would like to see, having a runway of about 60 to 70K in the beginning stages that you're able to just kind of go into the red. Business is hard, it's expensive, it's part of the game. If you have that kind of runway in the beginning stages, it will make your life so much easier. On this company I'm talking about here, we were, I believe, 55K in the red, no revenue made until we made our first dollar. And then, it made about 10 mil this year. So I would start at $1,000 a day in ad spend. Reason for that being is, I see a lot of people trying to launch companies and they're starting at low spend. They're starting at $50 a day. I believe it was Randy. We talked about this last night. Someone trying to launch at like $5 a day. You want someone who can work for you full time and take a full calendar. If I spend $1,000 a day, depending on the industry, I can probably book 5 to 6 sales calls. So they're just kind of taking calls all day long. So that's first priority, $1,000 a day. Ideally, that person taking your calls is the founder. Ideally, they're kind of charismatic, they're a good speaker, they're good on camera, they're good on the phones. That's kind of your preferable archetype for the person taking these calls. Also super important, we want fulfillment as delegated as possible. You know, one of my biggest issues in previous companies of mine, I ran an email marketing company back in the day, was, you know, if you get too wrapped up in fulfillment, let's say your company's making $50,000 a month and you're just spending all your time fulfilling on the clients, then it's really going to limit your scale. So you want to have the systems in place, make the right hires so that the founder is not, you know, super wrapped up in fulfillment the whole time. Now, if I'm looking back at our company at Offer Launch, this was our first month, or technically this is our second month. The guy before me kind of fucked it up, to be honest. You know, he blew through like, I think, 35K in ad spend month one. So I was not associated with that. But my first month on this company, we spent $20,000 and made 105K cash, 5x ROAS, $150 book calls, and 75% of the leads coming through the funnel were MQLs. Now, if I'm looking back at, you know, other mistakes that we've made on companies this year, like why are people not able to hit $100,000 a month, I think it circles back to a couple of these main issues, mainly surrounding just speed and aggression. You know, it takes a lot of just force and momentum to get a company to that first $100,000 a month. You know, people aren't willing to spend enough money. You know, things start going well, they start making money, then they get kind of scared, they pump the brakes, they start focusing 100% of their time on fulfillment. This is kind of a disaster. You need to just kind of brute force your way to that first $100,000 a month. I've made that mistake many times over the last decade, but you just kind of gotta keep the foot on the gas. So, as far as things you really need to have at that range, number one, if we circle back to these metrics here. So 20,000 spend, 105K cash. That's a pretty profitable business, realistically. You know, we had to pay out 15K for sales reps, but we probably profited 55K or so. That's super, super important in the early stages. You need to hedge your profitability because your costs are going to be lower at a lower revenue level. So in these early stages, you have the founder, probably the best salesperson in the company, taking the calls. You're only spending $1,000 a day on ads, so ads are cheap. All of these costs are going to continue to go up. Your margins are going to get thinner and thinner. So you need to hedge your profitability in the early stages and be very profitable in the beginning. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to scale. As far as priorities, prioritize call volume, taking as many calls as possible. And things you want to look out for, you really need to start building your sales recruiting pipeline. The biggest issue that I've seen a lot of companies face is like when things are going well, they don't have like what they need to get to that next step. You know, you don't want to get stuck at $100,000 a month and you don't have sales reps you can bring on so you can scale ad spend. So I think in general, like as far as your mindset in those early stages, just move fast, just break shit. You know, there's going to be problems, but worst case scenario, you know, you're not going to get sued, hopefully. You can always refund people. That's kind of how I see it in those early stages of running a company. Okay, next. As far as scaling 100 to 200K, so we have to make a couple big changes here. So I would recommend at this stage, you want to hire 2 closers and at least 1 setter. Now, the reason you want to do 2 here is because you never want to hire 1 salesperson at one time. You want to hire 2, and you want to pit them against each other and see who does better. If you only have 1 salesperson, you don't really have a good pulse on if they're actually doing well. You don't know if marketing sucks, or you know, usually one is going to outperform the other. So we want to get 2. In addition to that, you know, start building out other aspects of the business. Start building out social media channels. Start posting on IG. Get your PR done. Start collecting testimonials, all that good stuff. Just because that's going to make life a lot easier further down the road. So for us in our second month, pretty slow. We did 120K cash off 40K. So as you can see, we doubled ad spend, yet we only did an extra 20K in revenue. Now, this type of stuff is common in the early stages of scaling because, like I mentioned before, that founder closer, that person's probably going to be the best salesperson in the company. When we hired a second one, they didn't perform to the same degree as our founder did. And that's to be expected. That's going to happen. So that's why you hedge your profitability. And a couple other just factors to consider. Like I said before, your costs are going to go up. Your cost per book call is going to go up. You're going to have to hire more people on the CS side. You get all these random softwares and all this shit. Basically, costs just kind of continue to go up after those early stages. Another thing, too, if you know like Murphy's Law, like everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Do you guys remember the whole TikTok ban back in like last December? How everyone was kind of fear-mongering, like, oh, TikTok's going to get shut down. Well, our company was selling TikTok shops. So, it's kind of hard to sell TikTok shops when the whole world thinks that TikTok is going to get shut down potentially next week. So you have to factor in things go wrong as part of business, part of the game. One thing too, I see this, this is kind of a joke, but it's not really. Don't go and buy Lamborghinis, don't go buy Rolexes. I live here in Miami. Everyone does this. You want to make sure you're reinvesting as much of the cash as possible back into the business. There we go. So Brickell's filled with guys who are renting Lamborghinis and make $100,000 a month, and I would not recommend that. So put the cash back into the business so that you aren't squeezing yourself dry there. Okay, so in these next stages too, I think the biggest priorities at that kind of like 100 to 200K range is you really need to crack client acquisition through paid traffic. So that means nailing down a VSL funnel. There's a lot of different funnels you can run. I like VSL funnels because they're fast. It's difficult to scale, in my opinion, other funnels at a really fast rate, like $0 to $14,000 a day in spend. That's why I do VSLs. You really need to lock down a solid sales process so that you can have that delegated out and hire more people for it. Okay, next, 200K to 400K. Now this is, like I mentioned before, you have to kind of become a different person throughout every stage of the business. In my opinion, as you go from 200K to 400K, you're kind of making that transition from being sort of like a hustler, you're doing a little bit of everything, towards you're like a real business owner at this point. You have a team hired out, you are not really doing the work. You are hiring people to do the work. You're not taking the sales calls, you're hiring salespeople. Or if you're the CMO, you're hiring a junior copywriter, junior media buyer. Now you're kind of directing people. It's sort of that transition from like founder to CEO, which for a lot of people, myself included, can be really difficult. From a marketing standpoint, we want to ramp our ad spend. I was varying between like $3,000 to $5,000 a day in spend here. And marketing does get more difficult at this stage. Running ads at $1,000 a day, in my opinion, is pretty easy. But at like $5,000 a day, there's a lot more volatility, especially on Facebook, in my opinion. And at this point, you also have more of a like actual sales team. At this point, it's not just one guy or one woman. You have probably 4 closers, probably 2 setters, and you're going to need either a team lead or a sales manager who's going to manage all these people. Because if you ever manage salespeople, they're not easy to manage. I just got off an hour-long call with my sales team a few minutes ago, and it's not easy managing salespeople. You have to have the right person in place to make sure they stay in line, make sure they're hitting their KPIs, doing everything they need to do. So in our third month, we had a little bit of a stagnant growth. We did 162K cash off 40K in ad spend, so 4x ROAS, still very profitable. But something that's super important to keep in mind, if there's one thing I learned from this whole experience is, I think a big part of why people struggle to scale is because they don't really just keep their foot on the gas. Anytime you have success, like for us, anytime we had a good week, we just scaled. Like for us, we were dry. We had no deals come in, like literally none, from December 20th through January 20th this year. Then in the last 10 days of January, we made, what was that? We made that full 162K in the last 10 days of the month. And once we scaled, then we kind of started to see that hockey stick growth. So we went from 162 in January all the way up to 490 in February. And as you can see the ad spend there, we also tripled our ad spend. So we went from about 40K in spend to 117K in spend. And we also maintained our ROAS too. So it's still very profitable, but making way more revenue too. But one thing to note here too, our costs did go up significantly. We went from $150 book calls to 300, so effectively doubled. And it didn't come back down after that. So things you want to consider when you are at this stage. Has everyone heard of like the Andromeda updates on Facebook? There we go. So we want to start significantly testing more creative. You can't just put out like one ad and run it for the next 6 months. I probably put out a couple hundred new creatives on a monthly basis for my team. You need to get in a cadence of just testing new ads on a weekly basis. A super simple way to do this, by the way, assuming you don't have like a big marketing team, is I'll try to wake up in the morning, I'll write one ad, I'll do 2 hooks for it, I'll do a couple banners, a couple headlines, and we can go and turn that into like 50 different ads. Just have a video editor jumble it all up and make a bunch of different variations. So when you're spending like 5K a day on ads, you need to be testing significantly more creative. Otherwise, your costs are going to increase, your quality is going to decline, things are going to go really bad. And as in addition to this, basically costs are going to go up. Your cost per acquisition is going to increase, and you're going to hire more people, so overall profitability is going to kind of go down. But if you are significantly increasing revenue, hopefully it makes up for it. So a couple of big mistakes too that I've made, I've seen a lot of people make are, failing to account for what's going to happen next. To give you an example, when you hire new sales reps, they're probably not going to perform well for at least 60 days. So you have to factor that into your metrics. If you're expecting your new salespeople to just knock it out of the park month 1, you're just kind of set up for failure there. You need to hedge that in your projections for, what they are expected to bring in, especially in, I'd say, month 1 and month 2. In addition to that, founders have to be making that transition into more of a CEO type of role where they are overseeing the company at a high level instead of just kind of hustling their way through everything. So I found a lot of people struggle to make that transition. In addition to that, keeping, at this stage of the business, like $400,000 a month, you're kind of like a real company. Now, you have to run it like a real company. You have to do meetings, you need KPIs, you need to honestly kind of fire people who aren't performing. Like we started clipping a lot of people at that stage who just weren't hitting their numbers, who weren't fitting the culture. So that kind of brings me to my next point. I think your biggest priority at this stage is building good company culture. Like for us, we had an office here in downtown Miami. We had about 30 or 40 guys in there. And our culture was just like, everyone in here is just kind of a savage. We're all in the office from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. every single day. Everyone's working hard. Everyone's money hungry. And we just enforce that culture really strictly. If you ever watch like motivational videos or anything, like you'll see like college football coaches talk about this, but like the company culture, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but this shit's so important. If you have people who don't fit within the culture of the company, it's super important that you just get them out, honestly. Don't keep them. Don't hire them in the first place. You need to vet them for that to make sure they fit within the company. And if you see like an inkling that they aren't a good fit, you need to nip that in the bud, have that conversation, put them on a PIP, and make sure that they aren't infecting everyone. Because even if someone's a good performer, if they have the wrong attitude, it really infects the entire company, especially on sales teams, in my opinion. You can have one kind of prima donna salesperson that makes a lot of problems for everyone. So hire slow, fire fast. Okay, going 400K to 700K. By the way, if anyone has any questions throughout this, we can keep this conversational. Feel free to pop in with those. At this stage, I would recommend, 5 minutes? Cool. I'd recommend you start building out additional funnels. So if you have one main acquisition source, like let's say you have one VSL funnel that has just been printing for you consistently, at this stage, you should just start a second one. I wouldn't necessarily go and launch low ticket or launch webinars. I would just go and redo what you're currently doing so you have 2 different acquisition sources. We launched our second VSL funnel around this stage, and that did play a big role in us being able to scale. You want to continue scaling the sales team. At this point, probably 6 closers, 3 setters, somewhere in that range. And you just need to continue just moving fast, breaking things along the way. So for us, our 5th month, we did 709 cash. We spent 210K. ROAS took a dip, 337, and call volume still pretty similar. So our profitability took a pretty big hit that month, but back to ramping salespeople, you have to factor that in. New people you hire, they're not going to perform right off the bat, I would say. So a couple of things that I would also mention here. How many of you started a business because you wanted, freedom, lifestyle freedom? You want to be able to travel and stuff. I hate to break it to you, but if you're running a $1 million a month company, that's not really going to be the case. Just being straight up with you. At this level of scale, it's stressful. A lot of times you're dealing with a lot of fires every single day, client fires. I'm not going to go into it. We had a lot of problems. This could be also internally with the clients, with the team, but you're going to be in a state of fighting a lot of fires. If you want to make a lot of money, you're going to have to deal with a lot of fires. So that's one thing to just kind of keep in mind. I think you have to have a positive mindset about that. Like I said before, got to start running the business like a real business. Have KPIs, have meetings. I'm on probably 3 to 4 hours of meetings a day. Meet with the exec team, meet with my marketing team, meet with the sales team, just so that everyone's on point. At this stage, you also should start looking into building a leadership team. If you don't have a CMO, if you don't have a director of sales, if you don't have a COO, you don't necessarily need a COO and a CFO at that stage, but you should probably start scouting for it. If you need an accountant, by the way, Anthony here, and Anthony's awesome. He's my accountant. Get an accountant. You need one of those. And you want to start systematizing everything you do out. So I think in the early stages of the company, everyone has to kind of do a little bit of everything, wear a lot of different hats. At a later stage, it's the opposite. You don't want anyone doing anything that's not their job. Everyone needs to know exactly what their job is and what times they have to have things done by. To give you an example here, this is just one of my internal team marketing SOPs. So for every single person on the team, we know who does what. We have timelines attached to each of these inside Asana. Things are just very by the book. There's no gray area in terms of who's doing what. Because you have to be just a killer operator in order to kind of maintain that level of scale. Because you can get away with just being a hustler at $100,000 a month. At $1 million a month, that, your company will fall apart overnight if you do that. So as far as making the transition from $700 to $1 million a month, again, shifts need to be made. I think one of the biggest shifts to make is your marketing team specifically needs to turn into more of a focus on instead of just raw aggression, trying to scale all the time, you want to shift towards more of a don't fuck it up mentality. If you're spending, say, 10 grand a day on ads, making changes to your funnel, making changes to your application, that can go very, very poorly if you're just making big changes. So you want to be a lot more slow. You want to be a lot more intentional at a higher level of scale. But at the same time, still got to keep moving, keep running the sales team. So for us, in month 6, we did just over $1 million cash, 253K spent, ROAS 427. And we kept it going a little bit after there. We ran it up to 1.115 off a 300K spend. A little bit of a dip in terms of our profitability too. So, like I said before, you need to start thinking about risk mitigation because, at this stage of the company, if you're profiting like several $100,000 a month, one kind of key shift you need to make is like, if you want to sail off into the sunset, live the rest of your life on a beach and, just kind of have freedom. If you have a company at this scale, like $1 million a month, 4x ROAS, you're profiting like a couple $100,000 a month. If you literally just stay the course for like 12 to 18 months, you're making essentially life-changing money, and you can kind of do whatever you want after that. But if you mess it up, if you make big changes, if you lose key employees, that is not really going to happen. So a couple risks that can mess that up. Number one is, if your fulfillment sucks. If you're scamming, if you're like a lot of guys here in Miami, you're just scamming everyone, don't do that. You're going to get hit by the FTC or worse, the SEC. You don't want that to happen. So make sure your fulfillment is actually good. That's big. Another one is the owners get lazy. I think a lot of times when, you're taking home a lot of money on a monthly basis, like, if you're making like say 60 grand a month take home income, you don't necessarily have a ton of motivation to go to like 100, but you do want to kind of take time off. So owners can get lazy. So need to make sure everyone on the leadership team is kept in check. Shiny object syndrome, that's huge. I get it all the time. And also just getting poached by other people. When you're running a big company, a lot of times people start trying to poach your employees, your leadership team, all of that. So got to watch out for these. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. So yeah. All right.
Anyone have questions? All right, here we go.
Thanks. Amazing. Really enjoyed that. Question number one, was this a TikTok shop offer? If you don't have to say it if you don't want to, but was it?
Yeah, that's right. So like done for you stores. So.
Okay, interesting. Number two, your ROAS got better, like as you kind of scaled from 500K a month to $1 million a month. We're at like the very low 7 figures a year range, TikTok shop, and that's our problem. Like we were trying to go to 10 mil a year, spend more, profit goes kind of to shit, and then I'm like, well, let's spend less, but then you just make less money. So we're on month 6 of the offer, but like our first 3 months were very similar to yours, but then we could not keep profitability. So how did you keep, stay profitable and continue to scale up from 6 figures a month to 7 figures a month?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, biggest thing, in my opinion, is just quality of your salespeople. If you're KPIing each of your salespeople at 150K cash per month, for example, one poor performer that only brings in 100, that's a huge hit to your profit margin. So we were just very, very strict about the salespeople we brought on. We brought pretty much all 6 of ours from our internal networks, so they were pretty vetted. But if you can just keep the salespeople good, and then make sure marketing metrics stay in check. Don't let your cost per call, cost per lead spiral out of control. Easier said than done, I will say. But if you can nail those 2 things, like, you're going to take a little bit of a hit profitability-wise. It's inevitable as you scale, but it will be mitigated at least. We use Hyros. We actually have like a custom tracking solution. One of my friends is a little crazy, but he got fed up with Hyros, so he just built his own. But